Sam said, in the current climate, it can be challenging to navigate political discussions without getting too heated. How can we engage in constructive conversations about important issues with friends and family? What a great question for the holiday that's approaching.
Because it's inevitably going to come up during the Thanksgiving meal, right?
Yep. If you have a big family, everyone's going to have different opinions,
Yeah.
especially as adults.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, there's kind of, I think sometimes there's this idea of like, oh, we don't talk about that around Uncle James or Spence or Dad or whatever. And I just think that's the most ignorant approach to life, personally. And I get that, you know, yeah, maybe there's just certain topics of discussion that it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't make sense because you're never going to be able to have a cordial conversation. But objectively speaking, I think that's a horrible way to approach life, because if you're constantly avoiding topics of discussion, then I think it creates a vacuum. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it leads to ignorance. Like if you're like, oh, we don't talk about that, or we don't talk about this, or we don't do this. I heard a quote a while back, and I think it's really relevant to this question. The sign of true intelligence is being able to hold two opposing ideas in your mind and understand and appreciate both of the perspectives. So Republican, Democrat, like I can understand why one would feel that way. I can understand why one would feel this way. I can objectively see their perspective, and I can agree to disagree or appreciate one, but lean more in another way. I think, and I really think somewhere along the way, we lost our ability to do this because people get so attached to an individual idea or lifestyle or perspective.
It's such a part of their identity.
Yeah.
They can't separate it and say, I think this way, I feel this way. It's who they are. And that creates the polarity.
Yeah, this is, I think, the biggest challenge that causes the divisiveness in the world today. If we rewind back to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? And again, it said political, right? But you could put lifestyle, sexual, vegans, vegetarians. Like you could put any different...
Any differing opinion, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. 10 years ago, it was like, oh, my preference is I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat, or you're a Democrat, not whatever it is, right? It's like, and that was just a preference that we had. My preference is I like to eat fucking steak. Your preference is you're plant-based, right? Or
it's
whatever.
It's not true.
Whatever it might be. And somewhere along the line, we started to adopt those preferences as our identity.
Yes.
And so now I'm not someone that prefers meat. I'm a fucking carnivore.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not someone that's plant-based, but like
I'm
a vegan, and I don't talk to those assholes that eat meat and they're killing the planet and they're so cruel and all. It's like, yo, it's a fucking lifestyle preference. It's not an identity. And I think that's where, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, as you guys know, and he talks a lot about identity. And he says people will violate their values to act within their identity. And this is why, like, if someone says my value is family and it's Thanksgiving and I love them and I can't wait to see my family, but if their identity is different from someone in their family, that identity will actually cause a fracture between the value of family and the way that they actually perceive things. And that's how you get people that don't get invited to Thanksgiving dinner because they're a Biden supporter or a Trump supporter or whatever. It's like, how could you fucking support that motherfucker? Like, you're an idiot. You're uninvited. Like, we're not talking about, you know what I mean? Like, however it ends up going, it's because that identity has become so strong that they only see the world through that perspective. And that operates in a vacuum, in a very narrow perspective. It's like if we put on glasses and they blocked out all the red lights and all you saw was blues, then there's nothing in the world that's red. And so everything has a tone of blue. And when someone says like, oh, look how beautiful that, red flower is, you're like, there's no red flower. It's like you only see through the lens of blue and vice versa. The exact opposite. You only have a lens of red. And so it is very dangerous and it's very destructive. And I think the best thing that we can do is step back objectively from our emotional reactions to things and look at things and try to appreciate someone else's perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece, is like try to step into their shoes. I think if you're engaging in a conversation that's the opposite side, be curious as to hearing out why they feel that way. And if they truly do feel that way, you should be able to have an intelligent, respectful conversation where they share their side. And maybe open your eyes to their perspective, but with the respect and a little grace, like you can have a conversation around those things if you're curious and you're not just shutting them down like, oh, you're ignorant, you're an asshole for thinking that way. It's like, well, that's interesting. Like, I'd love to learn more about why you feel that way and handle it with a little bit of care rather than that instant cancellation, right? Because so many people, it's like you say one fucking thing and it's like they want to cancel you immediately. It's like, how? That's not the response, right? You
Grab
can
the
learn from
torches.
each other. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think we've all had an experience where someone has said something to us and it caused an immediate internal disturbance, an immediate reaction. Like you almost like jump out at wanting to respond, right? And I think the best thing that we can do is when someone causes that type of reaction in us is to actually just take a metaphorical step back and be like, what about what he just said caused me to react in that way?
Oh.
And I think just by checking yourself, you can actually start to hear people and try to understand their perspective.
And look, they could be totally fucking wrong, right? But if you react that way and cancel them and reject, you're going to turn them off. They're never going to want to listen to your side. But if you actually hear them out, right, have a respectful conversation, you could actually educate your side after they get to voice their side and maybe open their eyes to your perspective, right? But handled with respect. Otherwise, they're just going to cancel and shut you down. And you're never going to be able to actually give your side.
Yeah. It's
So-
interesting. So two things. One, I love this guy named Naval Ravikant, an incredible thinker, kind of an entrepreneur, Silicon Valley guy. And he was on the Joe Rogan podcast and they were kind of talking about some of this stuff. And he said, objectively speaking, if you aren't Democrat when you're young, you don't have a heart. And if you're not Republican when you're older, you don't have a brain. And he's like, because if you look objectively speaking at all of the policies and kind of like ideologies of, say, a Democrat Party, it is very much heart-centered. It's emotional-centered. It's like we want to take care of everybody. We want to support everybody. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs that. We should collectively be able to give them all of these things. And so it's very easy to get attached emotionally to those ideas because they genuinely, like, if economic principles didn't matter, their ideas are phenomenal. Like, oh, how do we, let's give everybody free everything.
course.
Like, amazing. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's support these people, take care of them. Objectively speaking, it's amazing. And when you're younger and you don't understand taxes and fiscal responsibility and things like that, it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Then as you get older and it's like, wait, they're taking how much of my paycheck? I'm working 20, 30, 40, 50% of the time for free. Like, that's crazy to me. And objectively think about this. Like, if you're in any income bracket, whatever it is, let's say your tax bracket is 25%, that means 25% of your time you're working for free. Mm-hmm. If you make more money and you're in the 50% bracket, when you factor in taxes with states, local, federal, etc., half of the time you're working for free. That's insane, right? So then you start to objectively think about that and you're like, wait, you're already taking X percentage of my budget and that's going to all these things that I don't even know where it's going. It's just like a black hole.
That's
that
the
doesn't
piece,
make
right? Because if you
sense.
work 25% to help contribute in ways that weren't aligned with where you want to support,
Yeah.
but when spending and the powers that be spin it in ways that who the fuck knows where it's going or for the right causes, that's where it's fucking painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that perspective from him because he's trying to illustrate that like both sides are valid, both perspectives. Again, the question was specifically like around political divisiveness, but we have to be able to appreciate both perspectives and then understand how to talk about them in a way that's non-emotional or non-reactionary. And I think that's honestly because of social media and the way that we engage most of the time today, people don't know how to have a non-emotional, non-reaction filled conversation.
Yeah.
Just like, to your point, get curious. Like, that's fascinating. Why do you feel that way? Tell me more. Oh, that's crazy. Let's, let me know about that. What is it? How do you come up with that conclusion? And so I think being non-emotional and being able to just sit back and listen.
Trying to detach the identity.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we do that, but we need
I
to
think
do
people have an unhealthy relationship now with the idea of conflict. Like when you think of conflict, you think of like fighting, argumentative things, but you need conflict
Healthy
to grow.
conflict. It's 100%.
Like, I mean, it's how they wrote the Constitution, right? You had a whole bunch of they weren't, I don't know, a bunch of founding fathers arguing and yelling at each other around a room for who knows how long. But I mean, it's conflict. Conflict's healthy. So when you approach conversations, knowing that like you're going to conflict on ideas, but it's not a personal attack against you.
Right.
and you seek to understand their side of things, and then you guys end up finding the right idea or the right way to have a conversation.
Yeah, so I think to summarize, one, I think the most important thing is to be able to understand and appreciate different perspectives, to try to put yourself in their shoes and understand why they're coming from that, like why they feel that way. I think that's number one. Number two is checking your emotional reaction to conversations that stir you up because you have strong opinions and beliefs. And then I think the best way to end this topic or this question is, I saw this post from Keanu Reeves, and it was like a quote of him. And he said, "I've reached a point in my life where I have zero desire to argue with anybody. If someone tells me 1 + 1 = 5, I smile at them and walk away." And it's just like, how fucking true is that? There's going to be some people that no matter how much common sense or logic or fact, there's the truth, there's his truth, your truth, and the truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth is their 1 + 1 is going to be 5, no matter what the fuck you think or say. Sometimes my truth is going to be 1 + 1 = 5 to someone else. And just understanding when we can have a discord, but then also when the fuck we can just walk away. And
Which is always, you can always walk away. You don't have to.
for sure, yeah. Interesting topic for sure. It's
Yeah.
very,
Definitely.
very relevant to the world today. And I think the more awareness we can bring to the reactions we have to things, the better. And you said you don't know how you develop it. I think it's just by developing it over time like a muscle, like you catch yourself. Just like you're going to go for a run and train, if you're training for a marathon, you're going to train miles on the track, you're just going to run. Same thing here is like the way we train our emotional response to things is just by catching it and trying to learn and grow and evolve.
Yeah, let's follow up on this next week and see,
See how the
have any
conversations went.
conversations we have with our family that get heated. All right, and then if they go bad, we can always throw that family member under the bus. Throw it out. Hey, if you don't do that, I'm going to talk you on the Beardsman.